From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Free Expression with Gerry Baker.
Hello and welcome to Free Expression from the opinion page of the Wall Street Journal. I'm Gerry Baker, editor-at-large of the Journal. If you're not already subscribing to Free Expression, please sign up at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you do your listening. This week, pardons, lawfare, and the future of American justice. The big news this week was Joe Biden's unconditional pardon for his son, Hunter. Now, it says much about the state of trust in our political leaders. The decision was hardly unexpected, despite the president's repeated insistence that he wouldn't pardon Hunter. Yet what was most striking about the move was that it not only keeps Hunter from going to jail for crimes to which he's already pled guilty, it of course also shields him from prosecution for any crime he may have committed at any point in the last 10 years. A period that starts with his stint at Burisma, you'll recall, the Ukrainian energy company, where he served when his father was vice president. Also this week, Donald Trump picked Kash Patel, a top aide and fierce critic of the deep state, and particularly federal law enforcement, as his choice to head the Federal Bureau of Investigation when the current incumbent, Christopher Wray, leaves or is removed from the post, presumably when Mr. Trump takes office. Now, the pardon and the flurry of nominations by the president-elect have placed renewed attention on the administration of American justice. For 4 years, federal and state prosecutors have been pursuing Mr. Trump. And now perhaps the tables are turned. Will the re-elected president take the opportunity to go after his adversaries in government? Perhaps also even people in the media? Is the law now simply another weapon of American politics? Well, let's talk about all this week. I'm joined by Mike Davis. Davis, a conservative lawyer, is a close ally of Donald Trump. He served as a top aide to Chuck Grassley when the senator was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. In that role, Davis helped shepherd the nominations of Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh through the confirmation process to their nomination to the Supreme Court, and he later clerked for Gorsuch. Mike Davis joins me now. Mike, thanks very much for joining Free Expression.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start, if we may, with the pardon of Hunter Biden. As I said in my introductory remarks, didn't come as a surprise to anyone. I think despite the president's insistence many times that it wouldn't happen, it of course did. Everybody's talked a lot about it. Most people agree that it's an extraordinary and egregious thing to do. What are the practical implications, Mike, in terms of all of that investigation that presumably still are waiting to be done into the kind of influence peddling that Hunter Biden was up to when his father was vice president and afterwards? How does the pardon affect that? Does it make it very difficult now to pursue those investigations? What's your sense of what the effects of it are?
I would say to President Biden, he better pardon the rest of his family and himself, because there is very clear evidence in the form of bank records subpoenaed by House Oversight Chairman James Comer that over $23 million went into what seems like every Biden family member's bank account, except for the 6-year-old granddaughter who they don't claim. But everyone else, it seems, and the Biden family got a lot of money from corrupt foreign actors around the world. And you have to ask, what did the Bidens sell that brought in $23 million? I know that the Trumps build buildings and other real estate ventures around the world. What do the Bidens do? And that's the biggest problem with this pardon. This is a nearly 11-year pardon for every conceivable crime for Hunter Biden that just happens to go back to the time when Hunter Biden was hired to go work for Burisma, this Ukraine business that many allege was a corrupt foreign enterprise to bring in millions of dollars for the Bidens. And so Hunter Biden could no longer face any federal criminal charges for anything he did for over a decade. That includes if he, trafficked women, if he dealt drugs, whatever Hunter Biden could have done conceivably under federal criminal law, he now is fully absolved by his father. But the downside for Hunter Biden and the Bidens is this: now that he's been pardoned in the federal system for any potential federal crime, he can no longer claim his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination for anything for which he's been pardoned. So that means that he can be called before grand juries to testify. That means that Hunter could be called before congressional committees to testify. And he can't avoid that now. And if he does avoid that, he can be held in contempt. He can go to jail for contempt. And if he lies about it when he's testifying, he could face perjury charges and obstruction and related crimes.
You mentioned there that President Biden had better pardon other people too. Do you think that's likely? We've got still another 7 weeks of this administration to go here. Do you think he will pardon his brother? And what about even a self-pardon? I mean, is that something you might expect to see?
Yeah, I wouldn't put anything past Joe Biden. He has proven over and over that he's corrupt, that he is a crook. And with this pardon of his son Hunter going back 11 years to protect the Biden criminal enterprise, the Biden crime family, and the $23 million they've brought in from these shady, corrupt foreign actors, you can't put anything past Joe Biden. So I fully expect Joe Biden to pardon the rest of his family, including his brother James and even himself.
Let's talk about this issue that you raised there about the fact that this pardon has been given means that Hunter Biden won't be able to plead the fifth, as it were, and not have to answer questions for reasons of self-incrimination. What in practice does that mean, Mike? Again, because ultimately somebody can't actually be literally forced to speak if they don't want to speak, I suppose. But what in practice, if he does testify before Congress or he does testify before a grand jury, what can a prosecutor or a member of Congress maybe expect to get out of him?
Well, I would try to figure this out. You had $23 million go to the Bidens when Joe Biden was vice president. What did they buy? And how is our national security compromised by this? How is the president of the United States right now, Joe Biden, compromised by $23 million that went to many of his family members? What the hell were they selling? What the hell were these corrupt foreign entities buying from the Bidens? I mean, one example is that there were classified documents that Joe Biden had in his possession. And it seems like these classified documents may have gotten into Hunter Biden's hands because, remember, Hunter Biden, certainly not a geopolitical expert on Russia and Ukraine, punched out like a 23-paragraph memo on the geopolitics of Russia and Ukraine that, from my experience, reads like an intel document, reads like a classified document that you would see from the CIA or the State Department. So there needs to be a damage assessment done by the Justice Department and by the intel community to figure out what was given away by the Bidens as part of this $23 million that came into their family.
Do you think we will find that out? Do you think we're going to be able to, again, with these obstacles thrown in the way, like a pardon here, and as you say, potentially future pardons, will we be able to get to the bottom of what actually they were doing?
I actually think the pardon is quite the opposite from an obstacle. I think it actually removes an obstacle. And the obstacle was Hunter could have claimed his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, but now that he's gotten that pardon from his daddy, he can no longer do that. So I think that the House Judiciary Committee, the House Intel Committee, the House Oversight Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Senate Intel Committee, the Senate Oversight Committee, they need to be aggressively investigating this because this is so much bigger than Hunter Biden and his debauchery. This is about the national security of the United States. This is about whether the sitting president of the United States is compromised by foreign bribes and other corruption. This is about what did Joe Biden give to these foreign entities in exchange for this $23 million that went to his family. We know that Donald Trump puts buildings in foreign countries and gets paid for it. What did Joe Biden put in foreign countries and get paid for?
And of course, Republicans will control the Senate in a few weeks when the new Congress meets. And presumably, you would expect this to be one of the key investigations that one of those committees will do.
I would hope so. If they're doing their constitutional duty of oversight, I can't think of a more consequential investigation than whether the president of the United States has been compromised by foreign bribes and other corruption. I think that is exactly what these congressional committees are supposed to be looking into.
Let's move on to Donald Trump's appointments. Been a lot of attention, obviously, on the name of Kash Patel, who the president-elect has said he is going to appoint as director of the FBI, but presumably means Christopher Wray will be gone one way or another straight after. Do you expect that to happen? And by the way, do you think Wray will resign, or do you think the president will actually have to remove him?
Well, I am very pleased that President Trump has picked Kash Patel to serve as his next FBI director. Kash Patel is a friend of mine. He is unquestionably qualified to serve as the FBI director. Kash Patel was a public defender. He was a national security prosecutor. For many years, he was an award-winning national security prosecutor from the Obama Justice Department. He served on the Patel Committee as a senior attorney who helped uncover the Crossfire Hurricane scandal, the biggest scandal in American history. Kash served as the number 2 to the director of national intelligence. Kash served on the White House national security staff in a very senior position. He is clearly qualified. And the best thing about Kash is he is not only a very serious, competent, highly skilled, highly qualified national security operator, he is also a loyalist to President Trump. And President Trump ran on this election. President Trump ran on the fact that our intel agencies and law enforcement at every level, federal, state, local, have been politicized and weaponized by Democrat operatives, and they need a house cleaning, right? And we need to bring serious reforms to the Justice Department, and Pam Bondi will do that as the Attorney General, including serious reforms to the FBI. And Kash Patel is the perfect choice by President Trump to do this. He is bold, he is fearless, he is loyal, and President Trump deserves that with his political appointees. I would say this: I was the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee for then and returning Chairman Chuck Grassley. And my job was to help Senator Grassley, Chairman Grassley, process these nominees. My second day on the job, the first time back in 2017, was the nomination hearing for Chris Wray for FBI director. And I remember when I got there, it was already set before I got there. And so I held the hearing, and I remember everyone all spun up about Russian collusion. Democrat and Republican senators and staffs were spun up. And they essentially were arguing that Trump was a Russian asset. And they did this to hobble President Trump's presidency because they didn't like what the American people did during that election, which was to put Trump in the White House. And so I think what needs to happen to Chris Wray, I would say this: I think Chris Wray has been a horrifying FBI director. He has allowed the FBI to continue to be politicized and weaponized. It started under James Comey, under Obama. It's on steroids now under Chris Wray, James Comey's protege. Chris Wray has allowed the FBI to go after parents outraged by gender chaos in schools and the resulting rapes in high school bathrooms. Chris Wray has sicked the FBI after Christians praying at abortion clinics while he gives amnesty to Planned Parenthood activists, BLM terrorists, Antifa, trans terrorists who are attacking crisis pregnancy centers and Catholic churches. This FBI has been politicized and weaponized against President Trump. They did a political raid on the office of former president in Mar-a-Lago for presidential records Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. They even doctored evidence. Remember, they brought the classified documents cover sheets with them that said top secret or secret or, whatever it said on the fronts for the classification. And they laid those out on the floor of President Trump's office in Mar-a-Lago, like Trump had the documents thrown around on the floor with those classified cover sheets. And then they took a picture of that and sent it out to the world. They made up evidence. They submitted doctored, made up evidence to the courts, right, as part of the bogus prosecution under the Espionage Act for records Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. Remember, they had the FBI go full force against January 6th protesters and then give amnesty to the much more deadly and destructive BLM and Antifa rioters. They went after Trump's top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro for asserting constitutional executive privilege going back 250 years to George Washington, yet they didn't do anything about Hunter Biden's contempt of Congress when he did a drive-by press conference and didn't show up to testify. So I would say to Chris Wray, we can do this one of two ways, buddy. You can either gracefully bow out before January 20th at noon, or I imagine that President Trump is going to fire you as soon as he can, and he should. And I would further say this. People say that the FBI director has a 10-year term. No, they don't. They have an up to 10-year term. And the reason their term is up to 10 years is because J. Edgar Hoover consolidated too much power in the decades that he was the FBI director. So Congress wanted to make damn sure that didn't happen again. And so they put a term limit of 10 years, not a term minimum of 10 years. It's a maximum term, not a minimum term.
Yeah.
And if Chris Wray wants to challenge this in the courts, I guarantee you he will be not only politically humiliated by President Trump firing him, he's going to be legally humiliated when the Supreme Court affirms that decision.
We'll take a short break there, but when we come back, I'll have more with Mike Davis. We're talking about lawfare and whether we can expect to see more of it in the coming years. Stay with us.
You're listening to Free Expression with Gerry Baker. Don't forget, you can listen to the latest episode anytime on your smart speaker. Just say, play the Opinion Free Expression podcast. Now, back to Gerry Baker.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Mike Davis, close ally of Donald Trump, a conservative lawyer who's been fiercely critical of the lawfare that's been conducted against Donald Trump over the last few years. We're talking about the future of the administration of justice in the United States. You talked about reforms to the Justice Department and to the FBI. Let's talk about those just briefly. What kind of reforms? I mean, obviously, a president comes in, Attorney General comes in, as you say, assuming Pam Bondi gets confirmed, she'll be Attorney General. The president gets to essentially appoint prosecutors for the various districts around the country. But you're talking about significant structural reform, personnel reforms. What, first of all, should President Trump do with the Justice Department? What should be the priorities?
So this is Mike Davis, the head of the Article 3 project, speaking, and I'm not a representative of President Trump. And what I would say about this is I would strongly recommend to President Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Kash Patel and the other political appointees in the Justice Department make bold, immediate, sweeping reforms to the Justice Department so it can never be politicized and weaponized again against political enemies, like what started under Obama and has been on steroids under Biden. And so what needs to happen is there are career officials throughout Main Justice, throughout the FBI, throughout the litigating divisions, throughout the U.S. attorney's offices who should have to reapply for their jobs on day one. And that includes the deputy director of the FBI, the assistant directors of the FBI, including the assistant directors of the key FBI field offices, including the Washington field office, the career deputy assistant attorneys general of the litigating divisions at Main Justice, the section chiefs in these litigating divisions, the assistant chiefs in these litigating divisions, and then the career leadership staff of the key U.S. attorneys' offices, including and especially the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, the Southern District of New York, the Southern District of Florida, the Eastern District of Virginia, and maybe others. These assistant U.S. attorneys who run these key units and these key offices should have to reapply for their jobs. I would fire Jack Smith and Jay Bratz and their Office of Special Counsel immediately. And I would also shut down all the January 6th units immediately. I would recommend that President Trump pardon almost all January 6th defendants.
Almost all, not all. I mean, which ones should not get a pardon?
Well, the worst offenders, the people who were violent against police officers, for example, I would say that their sentences should be commuted to a more reasonable sentence because nothing that happened on January 6th calls for a 22-year prison sentence, especially after we've seen the amnesty for the much more deadly and destructive BLM and Antifa rioters. $2 billion in damage, attacked the Portland federal courthouse on a nightly basis, firebombing the courthouse, killed a dozen people. So when the Democrats start caring about BLM, I'll start caring about January 6th.
Okay, and one reform that a lot of people would like to see with the FBI is to have the FBI's responsibility for domestic counterintelligence taken away. It's under that authority that so many of these abuses have occurred. Would you favor that?
I would very much favor all reforms to limit or eliminate the FBI's involvement with this. And I think that Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Kash Patel, I need to give them some running room to go in there and take a look at this and make these reforms. But let's step back and remember what happened here. And this is critically important. This lawfare, this election interference against President Trump, all goes back to Crossfire Hurricane, the biggest scandal in American history. And I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it very quickly.
Yep.
You had Hillary Clinton with her illegal home server as Secretary of State. She's running for president in 2016. They find out this home server had our nation's most classified secrets, an Espionage Act violation, along with likely the Clinton Foundation's pay-for-play foreign bribery schemes. The Clinton Foundation is taking millions of dollars from shady foreign actors. Was Secretary of State Hillary Clinton doing official acts in exchange for those millions in donations to the Clinton Foundation that funded the Clintons' lavish lifestyle with their private jets and their lavish lifestyle around the world? And so Hillary gets caught with this server. She destroys the server. She destroys the phones with hammers, or so she thought. But maybe, just maybe, our worst enemies like China and Russia hacked this server and had a copy. And maybe, just maybe, Hillary was worried that this hacked information was going to get released before November in 2016 and destroy her chances of winning what she thought was a slam dunk election, and she was going to be the next president. So what happened? You had the Clinton campaign with Perkins Coie make up the Steele dossier, fake evidence, fraudulent evidence that they submitted to the FISA court, a federal court, illegally submitted it to the FISA court, lied to the FISA court, got illegal spy warrants on the leading presidential candidate, Donald Trump. They continued to spy on him as the president of the United States. And the whole point of this was, if this hacked material came out before the election by the Russians, for example, Hillary can say that this is a dirty trick by the Trump campaign. You can't believe your lying eyes. These documents aren't real. This is fake evidence. And you say, Mike, that's crazy. How could you possibly think that? Well, they did the same damn thing in 2020 with Hunter Biden's laptop of the Biden family corruption. The CIA worked with the 51 former intel officials to say the laptop that the New York Post, America's oldest newspaper, got, your sister paper, said that the laptop had all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. Yeah. You can't believe it. They got the New York Post censored, the story taken down. That would have changed the election.
Can I sorry to interrupt? It's interesting you raised that, because one of the things that Kash Patel said has become quite a maybe a notorious remark. He said, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. You there have just mentioned, that infamous, the laptop issue and the former intelligence officials coming out and saying it was a Russian intelligence misinformation operation. Do you think there should be consequences for people, either people in the media or for people like that, those former officials who came out and said those things? Do you think there should be legal consequences for that?
So first of all, Kash Patel, like me, uses hyperbole, some hysterics to grab people's attention, to make the point that politicizing and weaponizing intel agencies and law enforcement is very bad and destructive for our country. And when he's saying in the media, for example, that could include people like Andrew Weissman. It could include people like Norm Eisen, who are in the media, talking heads in the media, who are part of this, right? So I would look at that. But I would say this, of course, if people are conspiring with government actors are conspiring amongst themselves or with private citizens to violate the constitutional rights of American citizens, of course they should be investigated. That is a very serious federal civil rights felony, conspiracy against rights under 18 USC Section 241. Jack Smith is very aware of this charge. It's one of the 4 bogus charges against Trump in D.C. for the non-crime of Trump objecting to a presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. That's why Democrats didn't go to prison for objecting to Republican wins in 1968, 2000, 2004, and 2016. And remember what they did with Crossfire Hurricane.
Yeah.
Not only did they make up the Russian collusion hoax and Crossfire Hurricane investigation, but when Trump declassified this the day before he left office with Rick Grinnell and Kash Patel, they declassified Crossfire Hurricane the day before Trump left office in 2021. The FBI, the intel officials ran to Trump and Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, and said, you can't release these declassified presidential records. You're going to reveal sources and methods. You're going to violate the Federal Privacy Act. So Mark Meadows on January 20th, 2021, the day they left office, said, do your Privacy Act review and then publicly release these declassified Crossfire Hurricane records. Well, guess what? They didn't do that. Instead, they did the Mar-a-Lago raid to go take back Trump's declassified Crossfire Hurricane records. And that led to Jack Smith's 2 indictments and the other 2 indictments by these other Democrat prosecutors. This is the criminal conspiracy, right? That is the criminal conspiracy that must be investigated.
Fascinating stuff. I wish we had more time. Just very quickly, we've seen this lawfare, as it's been called, for the last 4 years. Donald Trump's been prosecuted at the state and federal level, and now he's going to be president again. Is it payback time? Do you expect Donald Trump to do to his political opponents what the Democrats have done to him over the last 4 years?
No, I don't, because what Democrats did to Trump is they used bogus, novel legal theories to go after President Trump for non-crimes. And that's been very obvious with the Supreme Court's presidential immunity decision in June, the Supreme Court's decision where they tried to throw Trump off the ballot in Colorado and Maine and elsewhere under a bogus post-Civil War insurrection theory. They tried to use a bogus statutory reading of obstruction of documents that was passed post-Enron to go after corporate fraud, to go after your political enemies. The Supreme Court has struck them down at every turn. President Trump, his Attorney General Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, they're not going to go after anyone for non-crimes. They're not going to politicize and weaponize the Justice Department to go after political opponents for non-crimes like Biden did to Trump and his top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who went to prison, and his supporters on January 6th, who were politically persecuted, yes, persecuted under the Supreme Court's Fisher decision in June. But I would say this, that if they've committed a real crime like conspiracy against rights under 18 USC Section 241, they better lawyer up, because as the Biden Democrats always told us, nobody's above the law.
And it sounds like you think they are in legal jeopardy for that reason.
100%. I can't think of anything more squarely relevant to 18 USC Section 241 than politicizing and weaponizing your intel agencies and law enforcement at every level to go after your political opponents for non-crimes to cover up Hillary Clinton's real crimes.
Mike Davis, fascinating discussion. A lot of this is going to unfold in the course of the coming weeks and months. But Mike Davis, thanks very much for joining Free Expression.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, have a great week and speak to you then.